Washington mornings on the Mall. 105.9 FM. And AM 630. WMAL.
7:37 on WMAL, where Washington comes to talk. Coming up in the 8 o'clock hour, we're going to be talking about the events in Newtown, Connecticut. And we're also going to talk about a man in Strasburg who walked into a school with a 2x4. And on that 2x4, he had written the words, "This is a rifle." And he got arrested. He was trying to make the point about school security. Should he have been arrested? And what do you think about all the other developments there? And we'll also talk about the fallout from Benghazi coming up in just a moment. Larry?
Joining us now, Stuart Varney from Fox Business Channel. Thanks for joining us. A Merry Christmas, and more importantly, since you're a Brit, Happy Boxing Day.
I was a Brit. Now I'm thoroughly Americanized, and I haven't used the expression Boxing Day since I last tried to explain it, which was last year. Okay?
Well, now that you're an American, then you can use your God-given right to criticize our government. Talk to me about Speaker Boehner's Plan B. Here's all you need to know. Grover Norquist says it's okay. It doesn't violate the tax pledge. And Nancy Pelosi says that this is a tax increase and the Republicans have already lost.
Sorry, but I'm going to use my God-given right to criticize President Obama. I don't think he should have gone out yesterday and used the tragic events in Connecticut last Friday as a way of pressuring John Boehner to surrender, compromise on my terms. I don't think the president should have done that. Here's where I stand on this fiscal cliff debate. It's really a spending problem, and the president has not addressed our spending problem. Boehner has yielded by saying okay to higher tax rates, but the president has not yielded to significant, real, genuine cuts in spending, and that's the problem. So that's where we are, a few days before Christmas, a few days before the fiscal cliff hits. It's still a stalemate. That's my opinion.
All right, but you mentioned this statement by the president where he tried to connect the tragedy in Newtown, Connecticut, to the fiscal cliff discussions. I was very offended by that.
Yeah, so was I, Brian. I looked at that, I watched it as it was happening, and I was really, well, I guess the word appalled is a little strong, but I just did not expect a president to link those two unlinkable events.
Isn't it interesting that he comes out to talk about his blue ribbon panel on gun control, and yet the press corps, the first I guess half of the press conference was about fiscal cliff.
Yes, and what about Bol Simpson?
Yeah,
that was a presidential commission appointed by the president and totally ignored by the president, which came up with some kind of solution, a bipartisan solution to our spending and taxing problem. But the president didn't accept that, but he's very quick to go with a blue ribbon panel on gun control.
All right, so I look at this thing and I say, okay, the speaker's going to throw out his plan, which says we raise taxes on everybody who makes we allow the tax rates to go back into effect for those who make over $1 million. The president was at like 400,000. Some people heard his comments yesterday and read into them that he might be willing to move up to $700,000 or $800,000. Are we close, or is this still, not going to happen and we're going to go off the cliff?
I don't doubt for one moment that there will be an agreement on the tax side. Maybe we'll compromise around, okay, we'll raise the tax rate on people making $500,000 or more. Maybe we'll come to a position in the middle. But my problem is the spending side. It is pointless to go into a deal where there is no suggestion of serious spending controls or entitlement reform in the future. That's just not addressing America's fundamental problem. It would be literally kicking the can down the road all over again with a bias towards tax increases as opposed to a bias towards spending declines. This is just not the way to go.
Right, but, listen, we had the presidential election where this really was topic number one. We had one candidate who said we have to make some serious decisions about spending and about entitlement reforms. For crying out loud, Paul Ryan was the running mate. He's the poster boy for sound budget policies. And we had another candidate who said that's not the problem. The problem is the rich aren't paying enough. Well, that's the candidate who won. And I just wonder, politically, what can Speaker Boehner do at this point?
Well, I ask the question, can you get elected in America today for any significant office saying, I will take money away, I will spend less? You will not get what you think you're going to get. Can you get elected today? No. I don't think you can. Now, that may be a political reality, but it's an economic nightmare. If we don't get this thing under control, we'd have a debt crisis. Fitch warned, the rating agency, they warned another downgrade will come if we don't get things under control. We're not going to get things under control. And we're looking at trillion-dollar deficits as far as the eye can see. Now, we kind of become immune to this because the word trillion has been battered around for so many years. But the reality is we cannot afford all the spending that we're committed to. And we need a leader who's going to point this out and do something about it, and we do not have that leadership.
Well, let's rile everybody up here with Cut 10. Now, this was what Stuart Varney was talking about. This is President Obama yesterday. This was supposed to be a press conference about Newtown and his blue ribbon panel on guns. The questions then turned to the fiscal cliff, and somehow he married the two.
If this past week has done anything, it should just give us some perspective. I mean, if there's one thing we should have after this week, it should be a sense of perspective about what's important. And, I would like to think that members of that caucus would say to themselves, you know what, we disagree with the president on a whole bunch of things. We wish the other guy had won. We're going to fight him on a whole range of issues over the next 4 years. We think his philosophy is all screwed up. But right now, what the country needs is for us to compromise.
My guess, Stuart Varney, is that you might talk about this on Varney and Company today at Fox Business Hour. Can't you take the president's argument that, if we've learned anything over the events of this past week, that we should come together, and then turn it around on him and say, okay, Mr. President, then why don't we come together? Why don't you move to the Republicans?
Here's what I cannot take. Linking one of the most tragic events that I've ever reported on in my life, and linking it and using it to pressure your political opponent to surrender on your terms and compromise on your terms. I'm sorry, I just can't see the President of the United States. He should not have done that.
Well, I was watching last night on Special Report when Brett Baer did this long piece where he talked about what each American now owes as part of if we were to resolve our debt problem. And he said basically that every household in America currently owes about $140,000 to pay off the debt. And while that may be chump change for somebody like Stuart Varney, that's a ton of money to most Americans.
Yes.
And that's how dire the situation is. Every minute that we've been talking, the debt has grown by $4 million.
Now that's simply extraordinary.
It is.
I'm a European by birth. I look across the pond and I see where that wild spending, that out-of-control welfare state, I can see where it leads. And I got to tell you, Brian, I'm very sorry to say, we're down that road.
Stuart
long
Varney,
way down that road.
You are not a European, you're an American, but you've got to knock some sense into that European Piers Morgan. Will you handle that for us, please?
Yes, sir, with great pleasure, baby.
Thanks for joining